right. Well, let's kick things off this morning. We're a couple minutes in. I see we've got a full slate of attendees who have joined us. So let me start first off by thanking you so much for taking your time out of your morning, your afternoon, or your evening, depending on where you're joining us from. And welcome to the webinar, Medtech Post-Market Essentials. As the title implies, we are going to dig deep into the MDR and IVDR requirements for post-market. A little more detail into post-market reporting, the UMED system, and some of the responsibilities specifically for regulatory and quality teams. So before we dive in, just a couple quick housekeeping items. You will notice at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you have the option to submit a question. We're going to have a hopefully robust and interesting panel discussion today that will trigger some thoughts or questions in your mind. And we absolutely want this to be an interactive session. So at any point, if any of our speakers say anything or something triggers, if you have a question, just feel free to drop it in that Q&A widget and we will respond to as many of those as we have time at the end of the broadcast. Secondly, you probably heard a little verbal warning from Zoom. This webinar is being recorded. We will share the recording with all attendees. I know that's often a question, so yes, you will get the recording afterwards. So with that having been said, let's jump forward and meet our panel. Next slide, please. So really excited to be joined by some experts in the space, both on the quality and the regulatory side. Adam Price, Director of Product Post-Market for Rimsys, Kelly Stanton, the Director of Quality for Qualio, and Juhani Perhonen, who's the Chief Business Development Officer North America for Astotech. So let me just quickly go around the room here, or the virtual room as it may be, and let our speakers introduce themselves. Adam, you want to go first?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Adam Price. I'm the Director of Product with a focus on post-market surveillance here at Rimsys. Prior to joining the company a little bit over a year ago, I spent my time leading a post-market surveillance department with a very distinct focus on driving compliance with, at that time, the upcoming MDR and IVDR regulations.
Great. Kelly?
Yep. Hi, everyone. I'm Kelly. I'm our Director of Quality here at Qualio. I come from industry, lots and lots of years doing quality system work, quality engineering, etc. And definitely a lot of that time spent supporting the regulatory professionals in our various organizations with their post-market surveillance efforts. So thanks for joining us today.
Great. Thank you, Kelly. And last but certainly not least, Juhani.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm Juhani Perhonen, and I'm representing a kind of a company and corporate point of view here. So my background is in R&D, engineering, and quality management from several years, and I've been an entrepreneur and working on like a real life of this product development and see the whole life cycle, and also coaching the startup companies and trying to also tell the story and things about this, the whole life cycle management, which is post-market surveillance is also part of it. So I've been with Astotech about a little over a year now, so a new kid on the block with the company, and we are a software development company and looking for the markets in the US. So that's shortly.
Great, wonderful, welcome. Thanks, everyone. I think it's going to be just a great discussion today. So if we want to move to the next slide, I'll just talk really briefly about what's going to happen today. High-level agenda. We're going to start with just a little bit of an introduction to post-market surveillance, if that's a new topic for any of you, what that means. We'll talk a little bit about sort of the emerging requirements for post-market surveillance under EU MDR and IVDR, specifically what's required today, what's coming up. And then our panel will really kind of dig into what are some of the best practices that teams can prepare and put themselves in a good place to ensure compliance with these new regulations. And as I said at the open, we do really want this to be an interactive session. So we will take time at the end to answer any questions from the team you might have. So definitely as anyone's presenting or if anything comes up in the discussion, feel free to drop your questions in. With that, if we jump to the next slide, I'll let Adam take us through just kind of a quick intro to post-market surveillance and some of the emerging requirements from MDR and IVDR.
Yeah, thanks for that, Michael. And I wanted to kind of start off with a quick level set on post-market surveillance and the application in the medtech industry with consideration to those new regulations. So historically, post-market surveillance may have been considered more of the complaint handling, complaint operations side, reporting of adverse events, recalls, that kind of thing. But really that kind of falls into the vigilance portion of the new European regulations. Where post-market surveillance in today's world really means the application of all the post-market experience you gain as a manufacturer from all throughout the industry and the application of that to your medical devices to ensure that they remain safe and effective for use in the market. And if you think about it, what better place to confirm all the predictions that you made in the design of the product than its practical application, its clinical application in the marketplace. So you can see in the language of the regulations where planning of post-market surveillance and summary reporting of post-market surveillance are now individual deliverables within the regulation, and they need to be applied within a manufacturer's technical file. And there's actually an entire annex of the regulation in both the MDR and IVDR that specifies exactly what type of information needs to be collected and how it needs to be applied within your quality management system. So we need to be descriptive about data. We need to identify relevant data. We need to identify how we collect it, how we control it, how we process it. And it really includes all kinds of data, both internal and external. That can be performance data, clinical data, and any additional data generated by post-market clinical follow-up activities. From the IBD perspective, we're talking about post-market performance follow-up activities, which is, I think, for a lot of manufacturers of IVDs, a newer concept. So the regulation also drives us to establish triggers and thresholds to evaluate that post-market experience once we collect it. And ultimately, what we're after with the post-market surveillance system and strategy is demonstrating that we are gathering that information from the field and from other sources and applying that experience. We confirm the product is performing as we expect it to, and we take action when we identify that the product is not performing as we've expected it to. You can go to the next slide, please. So I think EU MDR and EU IVDR are driving some of the biggest reactions within the medtech industry, where previously the application of post-market surveillance, although not a new concept, was really left up to the manufacturers to determine how they applied it. In today's world, and as I mentioned before, with the specificity in the regulation and the deliverables that are now required by the law, the industry is really kind of working to comply with these new requirements. We're also navigating the impact of post-market evaluation with our notified bodies and their responsibilities. Their responsibilities are changing along with our responsibilities in the industry, where they have kind of enhanced requirements for evaluating, especially those higher risk devices. Emerging markets also play a new role. I think from the perspective of digital technologies, the emerging markets they're not coming into a regulatory game with expectations that are aligned with industry and technology from 10 or 20 years ago. They're coming in with the same expectations that we have in industry today. They want to be players in the same game that the most mature markets in the world are in. So they're looking for the same application of technology, the same expectations for summary reporting and post-market surveillance that these more mature markets are. And as they come into this space, we should expect there should be additional needs for documentation and reporting within our own quality management systems in industry and from the manufacturers. So this slide is a summary of the EU regulatory expectations for post-market reporting, and the form of post-market surveillance reporting can really be in kind of two different classes when we're talking about the EU MDR and IVDR. So we're talking about post-market surveillance reports for the lower class devices. Those are the PMSRs that you can see referenced in the table. There's also periodic safety update reports, which are the reporting requirements for our higher risk devices. And you can see those referenced as PSUR reports. The PSUR reports, effectively contain the same information that is needed in the PMSRs, which is, a summary of the results and conclusions of your post-market surveillance activities over the preceding data cycle or course of time that is the subject of the summary report. But there are additional enhanced requirements for the PSUR from the regulatory perspective, as well as from just generally the expectations of what needs to be provided. And those are becoming more clear. I think, my experience with the notified bodies and talking to other folks in industry who have submitted PSUR reports in the past, they're not exactly sure of what that content needs to be. They're not exactly sure of what the content and format need to be. I think that we should expect to see that become more clear as the notified bodies begin to understand what they're looking for, as well as getting guidance from the European Commission and the regulators that are controlling the requirements for vigilance reporting. I think we're also expecting to see a large burden in the industry. You can see in the table here that the higher risk class devices are required to have reporting on a yearly basis. And the class 2A devices, primarily the non-implantables, are now going to be coming into their first year of reporting. So on a biannual basis or every 2 years, which is kind of the maximum amount of time that the industry or the regulators have given us guidance for. So when we think about the burden within the industry, that class 2A device, non-implantable, is a large volume of devices. So there needs to be consideration within the manufacturers to accommodate those periodic safety update reports that need to be generated. I think from the perspective as well of the IVD, although the application of IVDR has been delayed and maybe several times has been delayed, I think we can expect to see similar challenges with the overall timing of summary reports and the impact in the manufacturers and the industry itself. So I think the biggest tell in the industry that we need a digital solution for post-market surveillance is data. We start talking about managing and applying large data sets. The words that come to my mind are, this is going to be very administrative in nature. This is going to be very complicated. This is going to be very confusing in the application. And technology oftentimes is a really great solution to resolve some of those types of issues. So once our data is sourced and processed, we're talking about big data here again, we need help to apply it consistently across the entire quality management system. Including those critical elements with, in engineering and clinical and your risk and regulatory. Those are all elements where post-market surveillance needs to be considered as an input and assessed for impact. So we need help in managing our programs. We need help in managing our strategies, all to really ensure that they're appropriately resourced and current. And we also need help managing our regulatory commitments for timely action and summary reporting. So I think living documents and living records are terms that we use in industry to identify that a process needs to be done on a continuous basis. And post-market surveillance absolutely falls into that category. You think about how oftentimes records are generated and then stored away in a filing cabinet or an electronic document management system, whether you're storing it in a filing cabinet on paper or in a PDF in your electronic documents, that data is really stored. It really is historical, and it requires revisiting and reassessment a lot of times to understand what the impact is. We have to go backwards to go forwards almost. So with a truly digital solution and post-market surveillance, we can enable that data, we can enable those decisions, and we can enable action and really bring life into the post-market surveillance space and your post-market surveillance processes.
Great. Thanks so much, Adam. Really appreciate the overview and hope that was helpful. I see we've already got a couple questions coming in. Awesome. Hold tight. We will get to those at the end of the broadcast. In the meantime, let's bring in our panel and start the discussion here. Obviously, there's a lot of implications for companies with some of the information that Adam went through. So let's go ahead to the next slide and start with our first question. Adam laid out a little bit of the initial reporting requirements for post-market under MDR. And in fact, for the high-risk devices, that first-year threshold of the PSUR reporting has come and passed. So given sort of what we've seen in the industry, what have we observed for that first year of post-market surveillance reporting? What happened and what maybe are some of the implications? Kelly, I'll let you kind of run with this one to start.
Sure, yeah, thanks. Certainly all of these changes resulting in a much more complicated landscape. And so, I think in the high risk space, it was a little less of a hiccup for those guys because they already had some tighter requirements, and so making some adjustments to either the kinds of information or their internal cadences. I think it was a little, to me, at least in my experience, what I'm hearing about, it was definitely less of a blip on the radar for those guys. In the newer spaces, working with a lot of startups and, kind of early phase organizations, thinking about it, I think it's been an interesting conversation of, do we really need to think about this now? Yeah, you kind of do, right? Because you need to think about the process that you're going to use to support it. What information are you generating, or what key points are you going to be looking for, as well as what tools do we have in place, or what tools do we need to get in place in order to make this work for us? Juhani, do you have any other thoughts along those lines?
No, I think you said it pretty well, and because the thing is, in my mind, that these even though they are in the laws and they are mandated and so on, but this should be kind of like a business as usual anyway. So these are part of the product life cycle management, and no matter if it's a first year or if it's a second year or if it's a 10th year, so the data has to be collected and it has to be used and having the whole life cycle, so that it means that then using the data, the information also for the benefit of the company. So even though we have these laws and regulations and we think that, well, okay, the lawmakers have been kind of nasty to us, that they have just built those kind of things. But I see them as kind of like a checklist for the companies and for the benefit of the operations. So that it's good that somebody has thought about those things. And now then it's up to company to decide how you collect the things and how you utilize it. But I don't see that there is, and to me it is, so it doesn't matter if it's a medical device company or if it's any other company. So who wants to be sustainable and having a good business, they have to have these kind of operational things in place anyways. So, but then it's that there are those mandated things that then we have to follow, but they are the things that we have to do pretty much anyways if we want to be a successful company. So that's kind of my general point of view here.
I think that's actually probably a good segue maybe to our next question, Juhani, and yeah. Of course, the immediate follow-up is, first year is over. Next year, we hit that first 2-year threshold for a whole bunch more devices and companies. And what do we kind of see from an expectation, both on the company side, but maybe kind of on the side of the notified bodies as well, for what's going to happen this May or this coming May?
Yeah, that's to me it is for I think I'm kind of like feel sorry for the notified bodies, because they have so much in their hands and they have to understand it. They have to do so much. It's even, I think, more burden for them than the companies themselves, because these follow-up things and the reporting and whatnot, they should be business as usual for the companies. But with the notified bodies, this is a new thing. And I know I have some connection. I'm talking with the notified body people, and they are kind of like, I don't think that they are scared but at least they are sort of like worried that do they have the expertise really to go through all these reports and really understand them. But the thing is that for the companies is that they have the processes in place and they have developed and they start from something, and the world is not ready in the first year or second year. It's just a continuous process and it's improving all the time. And don't be afraid of these audits and notified body audits. The guys, they are also doing their job, and we all are doing our jobs. And if there is a finding, so what? It's a finding, and then you would have to correct the thing and move on. So it's like a continuous improvement kind of thing. So I wouldn't be too scared about those things. And then there are those guidances, and there are those like MDR regulations. They are pretty good documents to follow and read what reads in there. And that's the requirement what's in there. So it's kind of like then having this evidence that how we have then built those things and we have those things in place. So it's gradual and it's kind of like continuous improving. And also the thing with these, like the audits and those things, you don't get graded like A, B, or C, or D. You pass or fail. So and so just go like that and do your best. I think that's my take.
Yep, I agree. I think hopefully people have been preparing for this, working through their systems, their processes. You know, again, your quality, a good, you know, quality system will support these kinds of activities because you're already monitoring a lot of this data. Anyway, if you're running your QMS as you should, you're already monitoring a lot of this data. And so it's really a matter of, you know, taking that moment to compile it, to sort of, you know, slice and dice it, take a look at it, make, you know, is there anything in here that's significant we need to be reacting to, you know, and yeah, an output of all of those processes. This, to me, this is one more output of a really good quality system already doing monitoring anyway. So, you know, doesn't feel like an onerous task.
Yeah, absolutely. And then also that this is, as Adam said in this his presentation, that it's kind of like a living document or a living process. And it is something that when this kind of audit, and even though there are those timeframes at 12 months or 2-year reporting, it doesn't mean that you start to collect the data like this 11th month or the last week when you have this cutoff date. So then the quality department is running like headless chicken and there's lots of dust in the air and you get nothing done. So it means that you have this process, this post-market process in your operations and you follow it regularly, be it weekly or monthly, but you have that in your process and you, so then you have the report. You have always kind of like report ready if somebody asks. It doesn't matter if it's a 2-year time frame or 1 year or whatnot. But you have the data already there and you can show that, well, our process is working and we have this evidence. So it's part of the business and part of the life and make it so. And it's really part of the quality management. And as in the QMS, it's the life cycle management of the product. So this is part of the life cycle management. And the thing is, the important thing here is that now it is with this kind of like a PMS, it's then a chance to kind of have these sales guys, post-market guys, and R&D to talk with each other, because it is a link between the final product and product in the markets and the R&D, because if there are some issues and problems, whatnot, so then you have this feedback loop and it's working all the time. So not just once a year or when you have a management review, then you go through these things. No, you have to do it, and it's a process. It's working all the time, continuously, and in some cases it doesn't happen in a day, but it just build the system so and work with that. So it's I see it's kind of business as usual.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and drill in a little bit. Specific to one subsegment of the industry and the IVD industry, right? So for those who have followed the timelines of new regulations, you know that the IVDR timeline is running just about a year behind MDR right now. So, and Adam, maybe I'll let you run with this. Are there any sort of unique requirements or challenges specific to the IVD segment that they'll need to address as post-market regulations start to come online for them?
Yeah, sure. And you know, the implementation of IVDR has certainly been delayed and may continue to be delayed with kind of the overall impact and consideration to the availability of devices in the field. And I think that's really one of the largest reasons that that it's being delayed, is because IVD devices that previously didn't require traditional certification in the EU are now subject to these same requirements. And I've seen numbers posted, you know, as high as 70% of IVDs could be impacted by this type of wrinkle in the regulations. So that means that everything that goes along with the manufacturer's go-to-market strategy for those IVDs, like creation and management of the technical files, is now required by the regulation. And the post-market deliverables that now are needed for your technical files, like your plan and the summary reporting that we were just talking about, are now required as well. So manufacturers of these IVDs that fall into this category likely need to create new, potentially, or bolster existing records, quality management system processes to align with the new requirements. So there's things like post-market performance follow-up as well, which is, I think, maybe not a new concept, but maybe new in the application for especially these devices. That needs to be accounted for as well. I think kind of the overall impact here is that the risk of the IVDs not being placed into the market is very great, and that's why we're continuing to see the IVD delayed. I think we can learn from the application of MDR and that portion of the medtech industry that it's kind of never too early to start. So as these delays are occurring, that shouldn't be a green light to move those responsibilities further down your timelines. We should definitely consider getting on them early, getting on them now if you haven't already, if your devices are falling into this category.
That's a good point. So maybe speaking of delays, we haven't talked a whole lot about UMED yet, which is really kind of a foundational component of the MDR and IVDR regulations. This is something we've definitely seen delayed several times, and now the initial sort of go live has been pushed to 2024 and perhaps longer. So obviously part of the requirement within post-market is that a lot of the post-market data, as well as the required reporting, should be submitted in the vigilance module of UMED. So, you know, in the spirit of it never being too early, maybe Juhani, what are some things that manufacturers could start doing today to really prepare for some of those coming requirements of the UMED system?
Yeah, I think I'm kind of like repeating myself, but it is kind of like a be prepared and because we know, and because we know what kind of data there should be input, and we know what should go in there. So why don't we do that internally within the companies and collect the data? And this UMED, to me, it is just a tool among other tools. It's a system, but the important things is the data and the information. And we can collect that information yesterday. So to me, it is just a tool, and postponing these kind of things. Well, I have an example from Finland. There has been a nuclear plant in production for, I think, almost like 20 years now. It's not even ready yet. So these things can take time, but I would say that just be prepared and read the documentation and about the UMED and what kind of data there should be done and input, and do it offline and collect it internally. So that's how I would do the thing.
Got it.
Yeah,
So
maybe as a complementing point, the UMED system in general is massively ambitious, right? The amount of data that they're looking to collect and make available and connect together throughout the regulatory life cycle of the product is, you know, super ambitious. And you know, they've actually written into the regulations themselves the capability to kind of delay UMED. I don't know if they considered it would be delayed quite this far, but you know, they anticipated with the complexity of what they were trying to accomplish, the need to get it done correctly, and allowed for that. So
yeah, and I believe, Adam, that it is possible for manufacturers today to access a sandbox environment to start to test some of the UMED functions. Is that correct?
yeah, absolutely. They're opening the various modules of UMED in a playground type of scenario. So as they're bringing them online, as they're continuing to enhance the capabilities of the system, they're making them available for industry and soliciting feedback as well.
Got it. So moving to our next topic of discussion here, obviously we've got on our panel, oddly enough, we have some quality and regulatory experts, and part of the reason for constructing the panel that way, of course, is that PostMarket is very much a joint effort between quality and regulatory teams and systems, for that matter. So as companies are looking to implement post-market surveillance, as they're looking to maintain compliance with MDR and IVDR, what is kind of some best practices for how teams can divide responsibilities, but also sort of foster better collaboration with or between regulatory and quality teams? Kelly, maybe you have some thoughts here?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Well, as always, have a solid quality system in place. Ideally, it's electronic. There's so many data sources here. There's so many places to look at information in your product's performance. Some of those correlate back to things you might be doing in manufacturing. Some of those correlate, you know, it was interesting. I was thinking about, you know, what data streams. We've got a question where somebody's asking, like, what other data sources will be typically needed to satisfy these requirements? An interesting data source that nobody really thought about in a particular device company that I worked for in the past was actually our warranty budget. Because some of our products could be repaired under warranty and then put back in the market. And we hadn't looked at that one in a while, but all of a sudden it was like, wow, why is our warranty budget just spiked? And we were able, as quality engineers, to go in and look at, tie it back to a particular change that we've made. That prompted us to then dive more deeply into what's happening in the field with this. All of that together, you know, didn't lead to a recall, but certainly you know, was a thing to look at from a patient safety perspective. Is there a problem here? All those kinds of things. A whole lot of that information as part of that investigation, of course, then ended up in our annual reports that we're sending in. And this has been a few years, so obviously this is not under current regulations. But my point here is that while a lot of this is typically viewed as a very regulatory, you know, focused responsibility, there is a tremendous amount of information in your quality system that also ties into this. And it should absolutely be a collaborative effort, but also with some good, clear responsibilities and boundaries so that you don't have people either overlapping each other, or you have this big gap because nobody thought about that section. And right, I thought you were doing it and I thought you were doing it, and now you've missed something important that you want to make sure that you're calling out. And certainly you want to do that before the regulators take a look at it and decide that you've missed something, right? So, you know, a good cross-functional team effort here is you're setting up this process, and then everybody in their respective areas, while they may be very focused on, you know, this part of manufacturing or this part of my clinical efforts, or, you know, maybe I've got a group running phase 4 studies over here, you know, all of those things, you know, you still got to have somebody responsible for making sure that all the right information is gathered. And then, you know, it can also be a thing to think about, again, from a quality engineer investigating a problem, you know, hey, what else is going on in the market, right? Those things are all very collaborative.
Hey, Kelly, how do you see then, like, as you said, like a cross-functional? So Because generally in the quality management systems, those sales and marketing and those guys haven't been kind of a part of this, like the ISO world. But in this thing, so how do you see their role in this whole thing? So like this aftermarket and sales guys, because they are there with the product when it's there out in the markets.
Absolutely. No, and that's where I love the universal ISO requirement of the feedback loop, right? The customer feedback, all that feedback, good and bad. And training, you know, have a process in place where it's easy for those folks to send a quick note through or put a quick note into a system. And if your systems are electronic and they talk to each other, then you've got that information available to you, because that's another very powerful set of information that I think people just kind of don't think about, or, you know, it's not visible if the sales guys are off having conversations and then not documenting it anywhere, right? So making sure that part of the staff, they are absolutely part of your quality system, because they're interacting directly with the customers in the sales cadence. Or, you know, if you've got field support staff, usually those guys are pretty trained up on, you know, complaint entry and that kind of thing. But, you know, what's good feedback too, right? Get all of that into your system, so that, again, you have a more holistic picture of how your device is performing in the market, and you're doing it in real time, not, oh, gee, my 2-year cycle is up, right? To, you know, to Adam's point about this being living documentation and living processes. Don't just review these things on a 2-year cycle. You should be reviewing them in real time all the time. It's good information for your quality engineering team to have as they're looking at maybe product improvements or process improvements, manufacturing, et cetera, et cetera.
Got it. Adam, you led this from the regulatory side for a number of years. What were some of the things that you did to really kind of drive cross-organizational collaboration?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges that we kind of faced when the post-market surveillance regulations, we started trying to adapt to them, you know, it really didn't have a great place to land in the business that I worked for. Regulatory was, you know, very primarily focused in the pre-market arena. And the post-market space kind of fell to post-market surveillance, which historically, as I mentioned before, was complaint operations, vigilance reporting, field action management, that kind of thing. So it was almost like the post-market surveillance team and group had to develop this you know, dichotomy between, you know, quality and regulatory to kind of balance in between those two spaces. And, you know, we were driving the necessary process changes, the necessary enhancements to our existing post-market surveillance strategies to bring ourselves into compliance with the new regulation. But again, kind of working cross-functionally with our clinical teams, with our regulatory team, with our risk management team, and, you know, making sure that everyone understood their role to play in post-market surveillance and their need to take post-market data and experience and apply it and understand the impact in their individual arenas.
All right, so going to go to our last panel question here, and then we'll dive into Q&A. And I'm just going to go around the room with this one because I think everyone's probably got some good advice here. But question is, do you expect more market surveillance data? Oh, actually, I'm sorry. I'm ahead of myself. This is not our last question. Hang on. I was going to reference the point, Adam, that you had made earlier about sort of digitization and the availability of digital data. Do you expect more market surveillance data to be digitally accessible moving forward? Like, what are some of the trends, and is there anything outside of Europe that you're seeing as well that might have an impact here?
Yeah, I mean, I think the shorter answer is yes, really. I think technology is going to continue to advance, and regulators are going to continue to collect more data and organize the data for their use. And then the next logical step is to really make that data easily available and accessible for the industry. So that data really becomes powerful when you place it into the hands of the industry, because those are the folks that are the experts. Those are the folks that can actually apply the data and allow, ultimately what we're after is this concept of proactive post-market surveillance, where we can respond to emerging trends, potentially not even related to our devices. So, again, making that data available to the industry itself is really important. So I think we're expecting big things from UMED and what data is going to be made available to us there once we're kind of fully up and running. It could be a really powerful tool. Of course, the MOD database in the US has been publicly available and is pretty accessible for the time being. I mean, I think that there are capabilities to directly connect to things like the MOD via APIs, where folks in industry and manufacturers can pull large data sets down, or there's even several businesses that are kind of subparts of the industry that are pulling data down and working to process it for the medtech manufacturers. Generally, I think there's a lot of data that's collected by regulators that is publicly available. It's just not as readily accessible. So I would expect to see, some of the more mature markets coming online faster, like those in Asia and Australia, to kind of improve overall accessibility of the data. I'm not sure from Kelly's perspective or Juhani if you have any ones that pop into mind that are great fodder for pulling in post-market experience.
Yeah, no, I think, as far as whether, I think it's just a matter of time, a whole lot to be going on around the world. I mean, certainly we've all been waiting on UMED to, really come into play. MOD has been a thing for a long time. I also used to manage a complaint post-market team for several years with a device manufacturer. We looked at MOD stuff all the time. And it's amazing to me how people don't necessarily think about pulling that information early in their development processes either, right? I mean, what more powerful way to consider, if you're coming on the market with a new or improved version of whatever, and you haven't looked at your competitors in the market, for example. There's a lot of great information there already. I think that's just going to continue to blast wide open as the whole world gets on board with this idea. Certainly the regulators are, a lot more open to this idea of digital information, and why are you still on paper? You can't do this effectively on paper. Effectively is the word. You can do it, absolutely, but man, is it going to take you a staff of people and a whole lot of time to be doing so much, just manual data entry, for example. So yeah, I think this is just going to continue to be the trend, and yeah, get on board, man.
All right, well, to actually jump to our last question now, let's just do a quick question around the room. As I said before, I think everyone's got probably some level of opinion about this, but so what are the key things that regulatory and quality leaders can really do to make sure that their organizations are ready for all of this? What are some best practices there? Maybe Juhani, I'll let you start.
Yeah, well, I think that at least read the regulations and try to learn and understand what's in there. Of course, the problem, especially with this like early stage small companies, because there's so much on their table, all kinds of things, and then they have to have these kind of things also in there. So it means that then starting to prepare and learn these things like yesterday, very, very early on, and so that they are not coming as a surprise. And because I know their pain, like the smaller companies' pain, so they have so much. So that's at least one thing to kind of like learn and learn from the peers and ask the others, because these are the things that I don't think that there's nobody who has all the answers. So it's kind of like a learning. And then one thing that I would say that is very important, especially for like the US companies and when they are going to Europe. So then there is this role like authorized representative who is very crucial. So it means that then also talking with those people and really understand what they are and trying to find a good partner over there in Europe to work with and who understand these things really and have done so. And that might be a task to do, but that's very important.
All right, Adam, what do you think?
I think that one of the key things for me is I think both Kelly and Juhani had kind of talked about this. You know, we are kind of really coming out of the gate here. And I think it's probably short-sighted to think that, you know, regulators and industry and notified bodies are all going to be executing MDR and IVDR to its full you know, capabilities. So I think recognizing that expectations are going to evolve in the application of you know, your post-market surveillance deliverables, the post-market surveillance system and processes, and you know, what data you're pulling in, which sources of data you're using, what data is available. I think that it's important to recognize that it's going to continue to move and that bars can continue to rise. So I think leadership needs to kind of understand that, and they need to continue to, you know, resource and recognize we're at the beginning of the journey and that the investment in post-market is really going to need to continue.
All right. And lastly, but certainly not least, Kelly, any advice for quality leaders?
Yeah, you know, this is the stuff we do in managing our quality system and managing our products through their whole life cycle is all foundational to this. It's absolutely foundational. It's critical. It's key to have those cross-functional meetings, those cross-functional conversations, have a good process, make sure everybody knows, you know, what piece of it they own and how it feeds up or down in the bigger picture, because these things are all interconnected. And so, you know, if you're not walking out on that manufacturing floor every now and then, you're going to miss something. You know, like you've just got to think about it in the bigger picture, in the bigger scheme of things, and know that, you know, this thing that I'm doing here is also going to be important to this other team in 6 months when their reporting cycle comes around. And so if you're managing all of these things in real time, then it feels like this is pretty easy. But if you're not resourced appropriately and you're managed these things by firefighting, then you're definitely putting yourself and your organization at risk here, for it either being a scramble or it being incomplete or, you know, whatever. So good process, good cross-functional, you know, make sure you're well embedded in the other teams. And I think this will be a very successful effort for your organization.
All right, great. Well, jumping to the next slide, thank you so much. Appreciate, again, thanks to our panel for joining. I see that we've got a bunch of questions that have been asked. Thank you all for your questions. We're going to take the rest of our time just to dive in here and answer as many of these as possible. I will take the very first one, which asks if it's possible to have access to the slides from this session. The answer is yes, absolutely. We'll send along a copy of the slides with the recording to everyone who has joined us here today. So next question, we talked about this a little bit, but I think this is another good one to lean into. So question here says, aside from complaint monitoring, what other data sources will be typically needed to satisfy new post-market surveillance reporting requirements? Kelly, you talked about some obvious and non-obvious sources. Anything else you want to add there?
No, I think I would just reiterate, right? Like the, your other feedback sources, like your sales feedback, if you've got a way to get access to that, You know, certainly there are some tools out there in market that do things like, you know, crawl the internet looking for places where your product or a product like yours is mentioned, whether it's, you know, it kind of replaces that old where we used to get the abstracts from clinical publications and that sort of thing. There's a lot of really great electronic tools available to make this a lot more efficient. But, you know, Adam, Juhani, I guess, what other, you know, thoughts you have there on the data sources?
Well, I would say that ask the customers also and the users, because they are pretty good source, because they are the users of those devices and solutions. So meaning that having the relations with the clients and customers and having that feedback and follow up from them, because it's a really good source. And then of course there's like a clinical studies and those kind of things, because they are very good source. And I would say that this when you are in the market, so then you have to have this PMS and you have to follow up when you are like a post-market. But to test a drive and try the thing and your process, that is when you are in a clinical trial, a clinical study stage, so in the validation stage. So it's a very good point to kind of like hone your system and test your system, and it will be working when the product is out in the market. So it starts this post-market also from these clinical studies and trials, and then of course then it's a continuous thing that you have to follow up anyway. So those are the two things that come to my mind.
All right. So next question. This is. I believe this is about reporting templates. The question is, where can we find the PMS template that describes the data that needs to be submitted, and what approach should be taken for trending data?
For this question, I presume that we're talking about the post-market surveillance report, which gets,
I would assume so, yes.
Yeah, it gets a little bit, well, maybe a lot less press than the periodic safety update report. I think there's a pretty significant guidance document already available or coming up to be available from the MDCG for crafting your periodic safety update report. And if you look at the regulations themselves, the PSUR is it's almost like an enhanced version of the PMSR for the more high risk devices. So I think the PSUR guidance document is going to be a really good source to help us create and craft those PMSRs. From Kelly and Juhani's perspective, I'm not sure if you have anything to add, but my understanding is that they don't intend to, as the MDCG, provide a PMSR template or guidance document. It's kind of all contained within the PSUR guidance.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
All right. So next question actually speaks specifically to the software side of the medical device industry. And the questioner asked, said, many of the medical device regulations are specific to physical devices. Are there any specific or good guidance for software as a medical devices entering the EU market?
I don't think that any specific. It is a device as any device. So the guidance and rules are the same if it's an SAMD or digital health solution or whatnot. It's a device as anything else. And the thing is that what kind of a class it is. Is it like a class 2A, class 2B, or 3 device? So that is the thing that then the device and how you then build your system. What are the actual requirements? It's depending on this kind of classification of the device. That's more important than what kind of device it is.
Well, and leverage your label claims and your intended use, as part of your device to then drive, the using risk management to then come through and, because the requirements are all the same. Like you've got, it's a list of boxes to check, but if some of those don't apply to you, you know, then there's still, you know, again, coming back to the scope of our device is this, and have all of that documentation very clear all the way through. And then, you know, because again, you know, SAMD is an interesting category. It's, you know, and a whole lot of things that didn't used to be device are now device in Europe and that sort of thing. But if you've got a well-defined, you know, intended use, you can start from there to then scale up or down the amount of information that you're looking at and what really is critical.
All right. So next question. When so many documents require the same elements, what are best practices and ideas to keep them aligned? And the questioner noted that the device description is required in the TD summary, the CER, PMS plan, PSUR, etc. Many other items like complaint analysis and others overlap too. How do we establish one source of truth and ensure alignment across all MDR documentation? I think that maybe goes back to the
quality management system.
goes back to the digitization discussion, doesn't it?
Have a good, solid quality system. You know, it should be your central source of truth, and everybody needs to be using it. And that includes, you know, it's interesting to me how often, like regulatory, you know, like, oh, we're going to keep our documents over here. No, they all need to be in here. And ideally, your system provides you with the ability to link things so that you can assess impact. Hey, I'm going to update this description in, you know, in my, you know, all the way back in my device history file, for example. What are all the documents that are then impacted by that? You know, a good, solid digital system will give you the ability to manage those things and make sure that the links are connected and you can control the processes from there.
Yeah, it's about the traceability and good document control and that kind of things, and having processes in place and working that way.
All right. Next question. What database requirements should manufacturers consider when preparing for UMED?
Well, certainly ensure whatever database you're using internally for things like complaint management and post-market surveillance, that you have the ability to set that up to reflect those critical elements that, you know, from whether it's MOD or UMED or whatever. But Adam, Johanni, and what else you guys are seeing in the space for this?
Yeah, I was going to mention, I mean, from the perspective of just general database requirements, I think you're on the right track there, Kelly, with, you know, making sure that it's, you know, a robust and validated part of your quality management system if you're managing quality data there. But from the perspective of the regulatory databases that we're interacting with, I would presume that the requirements to maintain and manage those would lie kind of outside of your purview as a manufacturer.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and this is maybe less relevant to post-market, but I would also just note that certainly with the UDI component, there's going to be an element of machine-to-machine transmission that companies can use to automatically submit and update UDI records, and that may be the case for other elements of UMED as well. So if you're looking at adopting, you know, systems or digitization, having that capability to be able to hook up and do those transmissions may become an important feature to look at moving forward.
Yeah, definitely.
So we are at the top of the hour and thus are out of time for the broadcast. I want to thank again, obviously, our panel for joining us today, and thank you to everyone who attended and stayed through the end. I know we didn't get a chance to cover all of the questions. We will answer, we will go back through and answer these for you offline after the broadcast. And of course, we'll send out the slides and the recording to everyone. Thank you so much for taking some time out of the day today. I hope the broadcast was helpful, and we will definitely see you at some future broadcasts. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.